You know that feeling of the last day before you leave something? Like the last day of school when you know you're not going to see some of your friends again for a long time or maybe ever? Or the last day of work where you're cleaning out your desk, saying your final goodbyes and moving on? For the individual, it can be this loaded, bittersweet moment of both somber finality, but also progress and moving on. But in the broader scheme of things, or from the perspective of the organization, it might as well just be another step in a never-ending cycle of people coming and going. That school you graduated from many years ago will keep churning out class after class of kids long after you're gone. And that job you left, well, someone will take your place, just as you took the place of someone else before you. Life goes on. And that got me thinking about the thought experiment of the ship of Theseus. In Greek mythology, Theseus was this hero who killed the Minotaur and escaped on his ship back to Athens. To commemorate this, the city decided to preserve the ship and take it on a pilgrimage once a year. But over the years, the ship decayed. Rotten wooden planks were swapped out with fresh timber. So then the philosophical question arose. If eventually every single part of the ship is replaced, is it still the same ship? Now, this is not a video about philosophy. I was looking at the Wikipedia page for the ship of Theseus, which goes deep on analysis and constitution, temporal parts, identity theory, and more. I'll leave that for someone smarter to digest. For me, I just want to make a small and maybe obvious observation on the ephemeral nature of groups and therefore why timing and urgency is so important. Let me give a personal example. Years ago, I was working at a startup. It was founded a few years prior to me joining and had now grown to about 20 or so people. The company had a meteoric early wave of growth and had since slowed down. It was doing okay, not great, not bad, but just okay. Business was stable and we were just about cash flow positive. Decent by most standards, but not by tech startup standards. Like most venture-backed startups, success meant that we had to swing for the fences. Linear growth was not enough. It had to be exponential. My mentor there was one of the early hires at the company. We'll call him Jason. At this point, Jason had been at the company for about 3 or 4 years. He was invaluable. He was technically brilliant, driven, intimately familiar with every system we had. In fact, there were many such people like Jason at the company, and I felt like with this team, we were going to do some amazing things. I was ready to go to work, and so I did. My days there soon turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and before I knew it, about 2 years had gone by. We grinded, shipped a lot of features, learned a lot of lessons, but the company was still just doing okay. Not great, not bad, but just okay. I felt like if the team just stuck with it a bit longer, that we would hit this inflection point of growth. But as time rolled on, so too did people's lives. Some teammates had great new job opportunities come their way, and they left. Some relocated and couldn't work with us any longer, and some people just wanted to work on something new. So as people left, we'd hire their replacements and just keep chugging along. Around this time, I had a chat with Jason, who told me that he himself was leaving. He was coming on about year 6 at the company, which is a really long time by startup standards, and he was just bored and wanted to move on. So I looked around and I had my own ship of Theseus moment. Where were all the people who had been here when I started? Our team was the same team in name and purpose, but yet really different in composition and momentum. In just 2 years, practically a third of the company had turned over. And I knew that in 2 more years, another wave of departures would come, possibly including my own. That's a pretty meaningful tranche of institutional knowledge, talent, and just team culture constantly being eroded and rebuilt. And it made me wonder, man, if we could just keep the team together, think about how well our results could compound and how progressively faster our momentum would get. But maybe that's wishful thinking because, like the ship of Theseus, every part eventually wears out for whatever reason and things inevitably turn over. For me, the lesson here is that in startups, and perhaps in life generally, there's often an unrecognized window during which conditions for success are optimally aligned. Sometimes it's pretty obvious. If your company has 18 months of runway, then there's nothing subtle about that. But other times it can be more subtle. It could feel like this new team you've assembled is going to stay together forever, when in reality, there really just might be 1 to 2 years of optimal productivity you have before conditions change again. I think sports is a great example too. Franchises always try to assemble the right combination of players and staff suited for a particular meta of gameplay. There's so many examples of super teams in the NBA, like the LeBron Heat or the Kobe Shaq Lakers. After overcoming the giant task of getting the right pieces together, the clock starts ticking. The team only has so much time together before players get traded, contracts expire, personalities clash, or other teams just start adapting. And almost always in hindsight, you lament what could have been. And so great teams aren't just about having great people. They're about having the right people at the same time and place, ideally with their individual primes briefly overlapping. As I get older, the concept of finality weighs a bit more heavily on me. Not only are our days numbered as individuals, but so too is each permutation of people, places, and purpose in our lives. That group of coworkers you may have worked with a few years ago, or that summer you spent with your family, for example, they're all fleeting, obviously. But even if you reassemble the same group of people again, you likely won't recreate the same magic or feeling that once was. Maybe that says something about how I feel about the ship of Theseus. Eventually, every plank on the ship will be replaced, but maybe what's important is making the most of the time you have on the ship.